So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Best Day Ever. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever, joined by my co-host, Adam Martin. And I believe that you guys should have seen and heard our intro song on today's episode. I know the last couple days it wasn't working because obviously Adam put a curse on our technology here, but I think I got sorted out today. So I saw it on Rumble as well as YouTube, so I think we're all good. But how are you doing, Adam?
I'm amazed that by changing absolutely nothing, we can get different results. And that to me is the definition of insanity, but whatever. Let's just keep rolling right into today's news, covering some more insanity.
Yeah, I've got a lot of stories I want to explore with you guys. I'm excited to jump into them. So just a quick little recap here of the stories that I want to hit upon. We're going to do a few previous story updates. So obviously we're going to talk about the Emergency Act hearing. We're also going to be talking about the Trudeau-Singh alliance and getting Rex Murphy's opinion on that. We're going to be talking about Twitter. That's probably going to come up a few times. But specifically, we're going to be talking about some of the big firings at Twitter now that Elon Musk has stepped in and taken over. We've also got some massive learning setbacks, show COVID sweeping toll on kids. And I want to get into the nuance of that language there because I think that you can already see a new narrative is developing. I think we need to squash this or nip it in the bud. Then I've got a couple WTF stories. Unfortunately, one of them involves a band I really like, and I'm pretty sure you really like them as well, Adam. So that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Story number one, we're going to be talking about Pfizer's huge hikes when it comes to COVID vaccines. Yeah, and it's interesting the timing around that, right? A lot of tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists will point out that it just so happens to coincide right around that announcement with the vaccine being added to the schedule the CDC recommends for children. So again, we'll get into that and a lot more. Then we've also got more discussions on the legislation around Bill C-11 as well as C-18. Then I want to talk to you guys about the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, which they just put together and put forward their proposed budget. And I think that it's important to understand, while it seems like no politician right now in Canadian politics really has the appetite to try and push for balancing the budget, there are ways that this in theory could be done. And I really appreciate the Canadian Taxpayers Federation spending the time to lay it out for us. Then finally, story number 4, we're going to be talking about parallel structures and how we can actually try and build our way towards freedom. But before we jump into all the stories and updates I want to share with you guys today, let's do a couple quick recommendations. So the recommendation I've got for you guys is I finally finished the episode with Lex Friedman and Kanye West. Really encourage you guys to go watch it. I really like the back and forth, and I definitely understand both of their perspectives. And at the end of the day, I just really respect Lex Friedman for being willing to have these conversations, explore them, and at times push back on Kanye West. And at the same time, I appreciate the fact that Kanye West is very, very clearly a free spirit that doesn't want to be pushed back upon. But Adam, any recommendations?
Yeah, I've actually got a fiction recommendation for you guys today. It's a book series that I've been extremely enjoying, written by a former Navy SEAL. And it's a work of fiction, but what it really is a piece of political commentary, I suppose. And I would just sort of prose that that's probably his findings after being in the military and being a Navy SEAL for the last couple of decades. So the book in question is called The Terminal List. And I'm sure you guys have perhaps maybe become aware of the new series. I believe it's on Amazon that's been available for a little while now, called The Terminal List, based on his book series. But while I thoroughly enjoyed the television series, I thought it was very, very well done. And Chris Pratt took it very seriously to capture the characters' emotions and all that stuff. I believe there's a little bit more of a political statement that you can explore throughout the various books that he's written. And I believe there's 5 out at this point, making it a cycle, or at the very least a series. So, yeah, I mean, thorough explanation and very, 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 very detailed, based on his experiences. But it's so captivating to me to read that type of fiction that is just sort of getting into some of those edge topics that are possibly not available to us publicly, when we're talking about nonfiction or maybe tweeting or something like that, fear of censorship or for fear of cancellation or anything like that. So very excellent exploration throughout those books.
Awesome. Nice. Appreciate the recce. So let's jump into the first story update of the day. We're going to start off here with True North. Day 11 recap of the Emergencies Act hearings. Lukey considered bringing in the military. So a couple of things that I just want to highlight here. Government lawyers asked Karik, you're actively considering whether or not the Canadian Armed Forces should be involved from the Ottawa perspective. No, I was not, Karik responded. That was the discussion that was taking place, and you can clearly see from my communication that that was not what I was recommending. Further on in the discussion, when asked another question about whether certain individuals from the armed forces should be involved, no, absolutely not, sir. Not special constables from the Canadian Armed Forces. At no point in time did I ever support, suggest, or recommend the deployment of the Canadian Armed Forces, Karik responded. Further on, as is becoming routine throughout these hearings, more evidence has been presented to indicate that law enforcement did not need the legal powers granted to them through the invocation of the Emergencies Act. Lawyers for the commission asked Karik if he agreed with OPP Superintendent Pat Morris' previous testimony, saying Morris' evidence was that there were no threats that materialized and that there was no credible threats to national security. Do you agree with that? And he did agree with that. And then further on, one other point here. It's fair to say that based on all OPP intelligence and the intel provided by the RCMP and federal intelligence agencies to the OPP, to your knowledge, there was no credible threat to Canada as defined in Section 2 of the CSIS Act, Miller asked. That would be my understanding, yes, as determined by SUPT Patrick Morris in consultation with CSIS and the RCMP, Karik responded. And so it's important first to lay the groundwork here, because then at the end, and like, this is one of the things that frustrates me. It's so clear, in my opinion, that everyone's just out to cover their own ass. Don't let this cost me my job. Don't let this cost me my pension. I don't want to be on the wrong side of this hearing, public discourse, or the Liberal Party. And so everyone's tiptoeing around. And so you would think that you understood where Karik stood in regards to this discussion. But then let's talk about the very end of his testimony. Although Karik told Commission lawyers that there was no credible threat to national security from the convoy, Karik agreed with government lawyers that law enforcement agencies collectively identified the Freedom Convoy as a potential risk to national security. Karik also agreed with government lawyers that the Emergency Act as an extremely helpful tool. And so there's a lot to, right, Adam?
Like, it's just amazing how loose we are, right? Like, okay, if force would have done, but excessive force was potentially useful, right? Or an extremely helpful tool. Like, where do we draw the line in the sand? And at what point do we need to be accountable to the actual words being used by our, people that are, again, in positions of power, influence, and authority? Like, it's just insane to me that, like, no, we never saw it as a credible threat. Like, there was no credible threat, but collectively we think that maybe there was a potential threat. So we overused our powers with excessive force. And you're like, okay. And then they say, yeah, that was an extremely useful tool. Like, well, okay. Like, where's the accountability, man?
Yeah, like it, to maybe stretch the analogy here a little bit, but it literally feels like you ask someone, like, did you have a mouse problem? And they're like, no, we didn't really have a mouse problem. Okay, but did nuking your house get rid of the mouse problem? And they're like, well, there was no mouse after the nuke. And you're like,
yes.
Okay, I'm not sure really what to make of all this. So do you support nuking houses to get rid of mice? And obviously, you guys can tell I've got a mouse problem at my house. That's why it's top of mind here.
Yeah, that's
But
quite the analogy, Matt.
one thing that I haven't nuked my house yet, but one thing that I think is worth mentioning here that really hasn't came up so far based upon my review of the testimony. Again, I'm not watching every single minute of it, so maybe it's just not getting through in the articles I'm reading. Is everyone's talking about the powers that essentially were granted to police, right, to the RCMP in order to go and break up the protest. Well, if you guys remember, that wasn't the only thing the Emergencies Act was used to justify, right? It was also used to justify literally freezing bank accounts, right? Interfering with Canadians' bank accounts and their abilities to use the banking system. When are we going to get into that and whether that was necessary? Because I think, again, as we're seeing here, what they're going to frame this as is, well, maybe it wasn't necessary, but it was a useful tool to be able to freeze people's bank accounts because it scared the shit out of them and made them really question whether they were willing to stand up and speak out against their government. And that's what's very concerning here, right? Again, it's not only whether the government was justified this time using it, but whether we're going to set the precedent that essentially whenever someone disagrees with Justin Trudeau and he just doesn't want to deal with them, will he be able to call it an Emergencies Act? And it's also important to understand, regardless of your spot on the political spectrum, that right now, obviously, we're very much here in Canada in particular, captured by woke culture, by the liberal narrative. At some point in time, and it doesn't seem like that point in time maybe is even that far off in the future, we likely will swing back on the pendulum and find ourselves in a conservative or some sort of conservative PPC hybrid government. And at that point in time, it may no longer be your favorites in power. And again, I don't want to see any Canadian government using these powers. And that's why I think we need to set the precedent now that this was absolutely unnecessary and there should be consequences to those that supported it, and particularly Justin Trudeau, who constantly pushed this narrative of fear mongering and COVID hysteria.
Well, and reminder for anybody that doesn't remember, but we have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and we are absolutely allowed to have peaceful assembly in this country. And if you guys are going to attend a protest in the future, there is a excellent document that's available for free to you with a quick, click of a button. You can download this PDF, and it's essentially a Know Your Protest Rights document. And it basically outlines some of the things that you may want to be aware of if you are actually going to attend a protest, and has some before you go tips, some if arrested tips, some encountering law enforcement tips, and some tips to how to proceed if your rights have been violated. So if you are going to be protesting in the future or, having some civil disobedience, perhaps you should read one of these documents available very simply with the click of a button.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing that, Adam. And before we move on to the next story and start talking about Trudeau and Singh's unholy alliance, I want to talk about something. I will not make an unholy alliance with the terrorists known as cats and get a cat or two, Al. So just wanted to put that on the record. We do have a cat outside. Again, I've literally got more mice in my house since the cat was here versus before the cat was here. But anyways, let's jump into the next more important serious topic here as well. Rex Murphy, Singh betrays NDP with pledge to grant Trudeau a parliamentary immunity. So what will it take to break the hoops of steel that now bind Jagmeet Singh to the fortunes and political health of Justin Trudeau? And if I want to be a bit of a conspiracy theorist here, if you guys will indulge me with my tinfoil hat, I don't think anything until his pension vests will allow Jagmeet Singh to risk his unholy alliance with Justin Trudeau. But further on in Rex's article, is there no concern in the NDP caucus that their impeccably styled chief, heads by the deal with Mr. Trudeau, effectively and objectively reduced the greatest, poorest, or protest party Canada has ever had to a mere sidecar? Or to vary the metaphor, a political airbag should the Liberals ever face some collision in the House of Commons. Further on in the article, he goes on to explore, allow me to expand. Even if the inquiry establishes that the Emergency Act was called without warrant, that it was not justified, that it was brutal state overreach, a breach of civil liberties, an annulment of the Charter, an assault on legitimate protest, the whole NDP party would stand by the Liberals. What if, and this is the extreme case, that possibly, I stress the possibly here, it was invoked not on national security grounds, but for more partisan or personal reasons, he would stay with Prime Minister who called it. And I think that is very important. And so far, we've seen that Jagmeet has said that the findings of this commission will not inherently call, like if it's found out that it was unjustified, will inherently be a call to action for him to essentially trigger election or put pressure on Justin Trudeau. One more point here from the article. If the imposition of emergency powers, the raiding of bank accounts, the jailing of protesters, the invasions of privacy rights, if all of this is determined to be nothing more than an overwrought prime minister exercising his distaste for the opposition and legitimate protests, should that be the inquiry's findings, would Mr. Singh stay with the with his Liberal partner? The Singh-Trudeau Compact is an insult to parliamentary function. It protects the government from all confidence vote challenges. It dwindles down to tactic cooperation on committees of inquiry. It mocks the voting result itself. The votes went for a minority with the protections a minority offers to the parliament as a whole, that it can restrain executive authority, numb the invisible influence of non-parliament actors in the PMO from running an agenda. And this really should be concerning for all of us here in Canada, because it is important to understand that a minority government operates substantially differently than a majority government. And had they got a majority mandate here from the general populace in Canada, that would be one thing. But essentially, when the NDP create this sort of coalition they often can still be the check and balance, technically, according to our rules here in Canada, to the powers of the Liberal government. But instead, now, when they're on these sort of inquiries or committees or whatever, when we know that they're just going to toe the Liberal line, it actually really does distort and pervert the intentions of our parliament. Mr. Singh gives Mr. Trudeau the ability unearned by electoral vote to rule as a majority government, an ability the election he called in a pandemic denied him, one which he does not legitimately own, and one he now holds as a result of a purely political barter. These two have short-circuited the elements of our democracy. I just think that's really important for people to keep in mind here when having these discussions around Singh and Trudeau, because it's past the point of no return for me to want to give Singh the benefit of the doubt that he actually just cares about the average person and wants to better their lives, and he thought this was the best way forward. I really do think this was about protecting his political career, protecting his pension, and just wanting to take the path of least resistance rather than actually have to be the party of protest as the NDP once represented, as Rex Murphy pointed out in this article. Any thoughts here, Adam?
Yeah, I think the word that sticks out there is mockery, right? Like it literally is making mockery out of our democratic system. Like if they can just make this type of alliance for political or personal gain and completely just negate the purpose and intention of how a democracy, or at least the democracy we have, should work, it's it has a very defeating sort of feeling to it, right? Like it just feels like there's nothing really that can be done about it. And it's like I personally feel like it should be illegal to have their compensation and everything tied to the way that they actually vote, because that just incentivizes them to do what's actually good for their own personal gain rather than what's good for the average citizen or for the country.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. I'm just throwing the chat here real quick into our Rumble chat because I always see people watching live, but I never see you guys commenting live. And so, again, if you're watching this right now live on Rumble, jump in that live comments if for no other reason than to prove to me that there's at least one real person watching on Rumble right now. But let's jump over and we're going to hit up Zero Hedge here and talk about the firings begin. Twitter CEO, CFO, and top censor escorted out. I'm definitely bullish on this overall in regards to Elon Musk stepping in and taking control and taking Twitter private. Just minutes after the world's richest man was reportedly closed the $44 billion deal, the New York Times reports that, according to sources that declined to be identified, the Twitter executives who were fired include Twitter's chief executive, chief financial officer, general counsel, and top legal and policy executive, or you could refer to her as the censorship czar. And you may actually remember her from Joe Rogan and Tim Pool's discussions here. And I actually think that this meme that Elon Musk tweeted out is a perfect example of how that entire discussion went. I was that back in 2019, yeah, it must have been 2019. It was pre-pandemic. But here's an example of Twitter's left wing bias. We have to take the context into consideration. Twitter's interpretation of the context is affected by their left-wing bias. I would need to see an example of that. And that's literally just how that conversation went on loop, on repeat, was constantly, no, we want to get to the bottom of these things, but we're not going to. And it honestly rings so insincere. But for anyone that's maybe crying tears over these firings, don't worry. These individuals are still going to be very well compensated. So the CEO is set to receive almost $40 million, primarily due largely to the entirety of his shares vesting upon firing. Seagal is set for 25 million, and then God is will leave with 12.5 million. So again, like it's actually an expensive decision to let these people go, but I'm glad that Elon Musk was in the position to be able to do so, and I really do hope that this drives real sincere change in at least this technology company, and hopefully, ideally, eventually spills over into other technology companies and social media platforms in particular, because in the market for competition of free speech and good ideas, I do think that this is a step in the right direction for Twitter, and I hope that this will force other companies like Meta. It's not going to happen for TikTok, but at least like Meta and other YouTube and Alphabet and all that, that we will see them have to second guess themselves on some of their censorship policies if they realize that the general public, that's us, realize that we're able to actually just go and speak more freely on one platform versus the others. Now, obviously, there are other platforms out there like Gab, like Truth, like Locals and Rumble, and all. There's a whole host, right? There's Minds.com. However, none of them really have the reach that a Twitter, a Facebook, an Instagram, or a YouTube currently has. And that's why I think this is so important. And this is why I'm so hopeful about this as well. All right, jumping over to the next story update here. Massive learning setbacks show COVID sweeping toll on kids. And I really want to just focus on this first paragraph here, but the COVID-19 pandemic devastated poor children's well being, not just by closing the schools, but also by taking away parents' jobs, sickening their families and teachers, and adding chaos and fear to the daily lives. Now, to me, there's a few things here that are very apparent the way this argument's being framed. So COVID did this. It wasn't government policies, right? It wasn't individual political leaders, administrators, or bureaucrats and health officials that decided to shut down your schools. It was COVID that did it, right? You remember COVID. COVID was this big, scary thing that we all needed to panic over. And this just frustrates me to no end because it's not sincere. Further on in the article, you can constantly see them trying to reframe the argument that, hey, it's not just the fact that test scores are down, there's other consequences to this as well, right? Think about those kids' family members that died because of COVID. Well, sure, that certainly is sad, and that is something to be taken in context. But what we should really be focused on is how government policies and policies that were dictated from the top levels of government, essentially, and arguably by pharmaceutical CEOs as well, impacted an entire generation of children, robbed them of their full development, right? We will continue to see, I think, for years to come, the unintended consequences of these policies. And it just frustrates me to no end to think that in all likelihood, there will be no accountability. Further on in the article, it goes on to say the analysis found the average student lost more than half a school year of learning in math and nearly a quarter of a school year in reading, with some district averages slipping by more than double those amounts or worse. So again, by double those amounts or worse, you're talking about them literally losing an entire grade school year with subject matters like math. Some educators have objected to the very idea of measuring learning loss after a crisis that killed more than 1 million Americans. Reading and math scores don't tell the entire story about what's happening with a child, but they're one of the only aspects of children's development reliably measured nationwide. Again, for individuals that are like, we shouldn't even be measuring this, like, that's complete fucking bullshit. This is you just trying to skirt around any consequences to your policy decisions. And honestly, one of the groups that should be most embarrassed by all this is teacher unions, right? You absolutely decide to sacrifice an entire generation of children simply on the hopes that it was somehow going to provide you a little bit of safety, that was maybe going to make your life 1% better. Adam, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I believe there was perhaps a just cause for this in the first months of 2020, but for it to continue on as long as it did, it was absolutely a decision on their behalf to continue just running with complete misinformation and a complete lack of humility to admit that they were wrong and a willingness to move forward with the new data that had been presented from all over the world. And in particular, I feel disgusted at our own country, because we're one of the very few last countries to actually begin going back to opening up our public and allowing our children to be back in educational settings. All the while, it was very clear early on that domestic abuse was up, right? Reading and math skills were down. There were many children and people that were in really bad domestic situations financially, and experiencing abuse or experiencing lack of food. And there's lots of programs at these schools that, if open, would have been providing them with some shelter and food and things like this. And like, for them to make the decision that they were more important, despite there being no data to back it up, like, to me, that's disgusting. And that goes all without even talking about the coercion and force applied to the parents and the students and the children to be vaccinated with something that may not have been a great medical decision for them, that was forced upon them. So I'm genuinely disgusted at it. And it's selfish. And it really is a show that these people, I'm not sure if they're the right people to be educating our future. I really don't think that our thought leaders, the people educating our children, should be the same people that cannot admit when they're wrong and cannot learn from changing in dynamic situations. That, I think that's a tell, right, about what's actually going on in our educational system at the moment.
Yeah, I won't go on a big rant here, but if you guys want to see me rant about teachers' unions, you can jump back to old episodes of the Maple Pill. But it should be very obvious at this moment in time, based upon our past experiences for the last 2 years, that teacher unions, by under no circumstances do they have the students' best interest at heart. They are solely out to grow the teacher union's budget. They're solely out to try and pretend like they care about protecting teachers. They would absolutely sacrifice your children on an altar if they thought it was in their own best interest. I have personally no doubts about that. But let's jump into our first WTF story of the day. Confusion if Arkells Alberta concert requires fans to show vaccine passports. I just want to say, big fan of the Arkells. They're probably, yeah, actually, I'm positive of this. They're the band I've seen live most often. We used to go and see them all the time in my mid and late 20s. And this is sad because, like, what happened to rock and roll? What happened about, like, Raging Against the Machine? But before we open it up to opinion, I'll just quickly share you some context here. So there is uncertainty about Arkell's Friday show at the Saddle Dome in Calgary and Saturday event at Rogers Place in Edmonton has mandated people provide proof of vaccination to attend. This is a direct quote. Based on the consistent findings from our healthcare community, we proudly support the vaccine and accompanying regulations to keep our most valuable safe, said Arkell's lead singer Max Kerman in a statement. As a courtesy to all guests, full vaccination is required to enter the show. Kerman said the Arkells is requesting vaccine passports because it wants to move forward together. There is no vaccine requirement at the show, said MNRK Music Group Vice President Ashley Poitevin. This is just like, before I get your opinion here, Adam, it's a courtesy to all guests that we're mandating that you have to show your papers before you're allowed to enter and prove that you've got a vaccine. And this is based upon our consistent findings from our healthcare community. It just, it blows my mind that still today that we're going to see this sort of virtue signaling, and lost a massive amount of respect for the Arkells. And I feel bad for anyone that bought a ticket who is unvaccinated that now is completely confused by this by these two different narratives that are being rolled out. Adam?
Yeah, I mean, this is in Edmonton, so I hope that they get extremely punished for this decision, because they should have known to read the room. Anyways, I have nothing to say. This is just, again, just another virtue signaling, disgusting little play that I hope, again, in the free market, they just get punished for this stuff. Like, this might work out in Southern California, but I really do hope that they understand the consequences of their actions. And luckily, this is something where it is sort of a free market, and from a capitalistic sense, like, if they just lose a bunch of money because there's no attendees here, like, I'm glad.
Agree. And again, just so disappointing because I really do love their music, but I'll never be able to hear it exactly the same way again. 11/11 is just never going to hit the same way as it once did. But let's move on to the next WTF story. This one, it's just like, man, if someone in the mainstream media, legacy corporate press, needs to call out Joe Biden and his apparent dementia. It's just wild to me that literally they were so happy to question Trump's capabilities and facilities while yet turning a complete blind eye to Joe Biden. Watch, Joe Biden needs to be shown how to sit, but Chuck Schumer's comments were the real embarrassment. So I'm just going to play this video. We don't even need the audio for it, but just watch this, guys. You're going to see Joe Biden here, shakes hands, then he gets pointed to where to wave, waves, puts up his fist, and then the lady sitting beside him has to literally take his arm and point to the chair like you would a dog and say, sit. Anything, Adam?
Yeah, this is the leader of free world.
Like, could you imagine? Like, honestly, like, it just blows my mind because none of my grandparents are alive now, but I did know a couple of them at least growing up, and like they would actually like get mad if someone like handled them that way because like, no, I can do it myself. Like, I'm not that broken. I'm not that old. I'm not that dementia riddled yet. And like Joe Biden here is just so complacent.
I literally, if I could take Joe Biden and put him in the 40s, right? Like, what would happen? Like, just as a counterfactual, like, what if there was actually something that needed to be done by the United States of America right now? Like, what would this guy do? He wouldn't have the mental facilities to do anything. Like, I'm just imagining him in Eisenhower's position, right? Or Reagan's position, or even JFK's position, like Cuban Missile Crisis, fucking on your borderline. What do you do? And Joe Biden's like, I don't even know where I am right now. Where do I wave? And you're just like, oh my God, this is literally allegedly the leader of the most powerful, richest country and most influential country in the world that believes that their value systems, their beliefs, and their way of living should be the way of everybody, right? World police America. And like, this is the guy running the show, allegedly. And all this shows us is that the position of president of the United States is literally nothing but a facade. It does nothing except deliver speeches when it is capable. I believe that that's the only thing that position or that station holds now. And it's evident by a guy like this who literally can't do anything except eat ice cream capably.
Yeah, he certainly is a mascot and a poor mascot at that, right? It's just so frustrating. I would love to see Joe Biden sit down for a 3-hour conversation with Joe Rogan.
Oh my
That's
God.
almost the only way you could convince me that he doesn't have dementia and he's not a broken old man. Jumping over to the last WTF story of the day. This one as well is from Louder with Crowder. This is Stacey Abrams. She's garbage human being, in my humble opinion. Stacey Abrams busted giving in photo op, tells certain people to socially distance for social media. So the essence here, again, we don't need to listen to it, but she essentially says, if you're over 18, we have to social distance. If you're younger than that, you're probably too cute to social distance. So one, what the fuck? And two, anyone that's actually paying attention understands why she said that. And the reason she said that is because she got just lambasted on social media when this broke at the start of the year, her sitting in a classroom where she made all the children wear masks, but she wasn't. Again, this is just the hypocrisy that we consistently see from Democrats, from left-leaning politicians. They don't actually care about these measures, right? When she tells people that for the photo that they actually have to be social distance. No one's social distance. No one's wearing a mask in this crowd. The people around her aren't. But for political purposes, right? That's the point. But hey, if it's a kid, I got in trouble last time because I took a photo with kids and them wearing masks. So this time I won't. It's just like you're literally doing whatever you think is politically expedient for your political career. You do not care about people. You do not care about any of the subject matters that you pretend to hold on high as like important policies. This is literally just about scoring political points and trying to appease the mainstream media and what you believe to be your liberal base.
Well, and she's literally running to be the governor of one of the great American states, right? Like, This isn't just like
she's
some
also
random
a
layer.
regular election denier, which is fascinating, right? Like, she constantly calls into questions the results of the Georgia elections, and she's already laid foundations, like we saw Hillary Clinton try and lay foundations that voter suppression was going to cause irreparable harm to democracy and essentially cause her to likely not win. No, it's literally just the fact that you're so insincere with everything. That's why people are not going to vote for you. That's why you deserve to lose this election.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing.
All right, let's jump over to the first main story of the day. This one I really do think is a doozy. Now, this one broke a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to give it time to marinate, I guess, as well as just see if additional context would come out. This first story is from Reuters. Pfizer expected to hike U.S. COVID vaccine price to $110 to $130 per dose. Further on in the article, it highlights the U.S. government currently pays around $30 per dose to Pfizer and German partner BioNTech. SC in 2023, the market is expected to move to private insurance after the U.S. public health emergency expires. So how convenient is that, right? The moment that it's going to be these private insurance companies, that's when you're going to jack up the price, as well as right after the CDC put forward its guidance that it should be recommended to childhood immunization schedules. Further on from Quartz or QZ.com, we've got Pfizer plans to sell its COVID vaccine at a 10,000% markup in 2023. Pfizer will charge as much as $130 for Comirnaty, which costs an estimated $1.18 per dose. So again, let that sink in. And reminder, in case you forgot, we actually, and I mean Western democracies here, gave these companies billions of dollars to make these vaccines.
Yeah, like literally covered their cost of development, right? Or like maybe didn't cover it, but certainly subsidized it.
I bet if you were to dig deep, we probably did more than enough. So just for context here, those purchases have included more than 500 million doses from Pfizer. The first 100 million cost about $20 a dose, thanks to an earlier agreement in which the U.S. government invested $1.95 billion in vaccine production. The remaining doses were bought for around $30 each. And again, we'll see them going up to 110 and 130. Just blows my mind. It shouldn't, because I think from day one, anyone that was paying attention to this knew that it was the profit motive that was the primary motive here. It wasn't about saving lives. It wasn't about slowing transmission. It wasn't about stopping the spread. It was literally about this, making as much money as possible off of this crisis, right? Never let a good crisis,
go to waste.
Never miss a good crisis and the opportunity to profit, I guess, is really the way that old saying should be adjusted for. Anything here, Adam?
Nobody should forget either that this is the company with literally the largest lawsuit of all time in pharmaceuticals for criminal negligence, right?
Are they? I know they're one of the largest.
I believe Pfizer holds the title. And like, if we're competing for championship belts, I guess that's enough to say anyways, but I do believe they are the largest. So it's definitely...
Yeah, so I think Glaxo's was the $3 billion settlement, which would include the largest civil false claims act on record. Pfizer was $2.3 billion, but if you adjust it for today's dollars, that would be $3.5 billion. So again, it sort of depends on how you do your math there, I guess, but just wanted to throw that out there before anyone tried to fact check us. But
Fair
yes,
enough.
You're right. This is like a race to see who killed the most innocent victims, arguably, versus again, I'm not saying that, I'm not using that as a comparison to the vaccines, but more to the lawsuits that they did. Let's jump over to the second story of the day. Spencer Fernando, with legislation like C-11 and C-18, the Liberals show contempt for Canadians. 100% agree with Spencer on this one. When a government believes it should decide what content you are supposed to consume, that government is treating you as nothing more than a cog in their ideological machine. Hard for me to disagree with that. And let's look at the vote results in regards to the Senate on the second reading of Bill C-11 here quick. Yeas were 49, nays 19, abstentions were 0. And this is important to understand because this is going to go through. And this is going to have weird, unintended consequences for years to come. The Senate passed C-11 despite intense warnings from Canadians across the political spectrum, including many Canadian YouTubers who said it would be devastating for their prospects. As if that's not enough, the Liberals are also pushing ahead with Bill C-18, dubbed the Online News Act. As noted by Michael Geist, C-18 is similar to C-11 in that the government is benefiting legacy outlets while ignoring the concerns of everyone else. And these legacy outlets are already the ones that get hundreds of millions of dollars in the CBC's case, billions of dollars in bailouts and subsidies from our government already. Now they also need the rules adjusted. So it's not only that we have to give them tons of money so they can operate, but now we also have to change the rules of the game. This would literally be like, we're looking at the Stanley Cup Finals, and you decide that like, okay, well, one team, it's the Leafs versus someone else, and for the first time ever, it looks like the Leafs might actually win here, the underdog story. And you decide that the Montreal Canadiens, well, actually, they get to pull from the rosters of everyone else because we're going to give them no salary cap. Oh, and by the way, they get 5 players on the ice while you only get 4 or 3 players. Like, it's just so bizarre to see this consistent handicapping of all this. And it drives me crazy, honestly. So if this all sounds familiar, it's because it is straight out of the Bill C-11 playbook. For months, digital first creators have warned that Bill C-11 could cause enormous harm to their careers and livelihood. In response, legacy creators shrugged their shoulders like Anne Rodriguez denied that the bill will affect digital creators, a position debunked by the CRTC chair and experts from across the country. Much the same dynamic is now playing out with Bill C-18. Over 100 digital news outlets raised concerns months ago, yet Rodriguez says that the department has not even studied the implications of alternatives. As for the big payouts for Bell, Rogers, and the CBC and the exclusion of small media outlets, he suggests that the small outlets aren't much interested in the bill, which is complete fucking bullshit. Hundreds of outlets are speaking out. You've got hundreds or probably thousands now of YouTubers that are speaking out. And again, it's small content creators like myself. It's larger content creators like Viva Fry. It's in between content creators like Clyde Do Something. Every single person that pays any attention to this knows this is wrong, knows that there's going to be wild unintended consequences, and knows that if you give the government and the CRT carte blanche to regulate this industry, to choose what information goes before you, they will absolutely take you up on that offer. It's honestly sickening. The Liberals lack confidence that the Canadians will keep them in power if there is a free and open exchange of ideas. So they are trying to tilt the playing field against independent outlets and towards the big institutions that are more likely to do the bidding of the centralized state. I 100% agree with Spencer Fernando and what he lays out in this article. Adam?
Yeah, I fully agree with that as well. It'll be interesting to see what happens when there is a government change. Like if these things pass and we end up getting like, the full totalitarian reach of, I think what Justin would imagine is the perfect Canada. I'm not sure what happens then when that changes hard. Like, do the Conservatives roll this back? Did they also take advantage of it, but from a different angle? It'll just be interesting, I think, to see this play out through government changes as we move forward. And like, I think I agree with you on this, Matt. Like, it's just going to pass for sure. Like, if the NDP is never going to vote any other way, and the Liberals are always going to vote, like they obviously have no minds of their own, as you can see through various voting. Like, there's only ever 1 or 2 Liberals that ever vote against the party. So it's very clear that if the party itself wants to push this, it will pass. So, yeah, I wonder what implications there are for us down the road. And certainly censorship's never the answer, but we already know that.
Yeah. And again, even if we get a new political party in power, it's often so hard to undo things once they're done, right? Like, it's not truly a perfect parallel to Pandora's box, but it's not too far removed from that either. There are so many temporary measures, or, well, we're never even going to use this rule or law, right? The government can find excuses like they did with the Emergencies Act. Just because it took them 40 plus years, or almost 40 years to get around to doing it, doesn't mean that they won't eventually use these rules and regulations to the fullest example, right? Let's jump into the third story of the day. We're going to be talking about Canada's deficit as well as Canada's budget and how we potentially could try and balance the budget if we were sincerely interested in doing so. Spoiler alert, the Liberals, especially backed by Jagmeet's NDP, have zero interest in doing that. But before we actually do that, let's just do a quick reminder. You guys don't know who the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is, you should probably brush up on them And at least an understanding, one of the things that I love they do, they've got this live counter. You can go to debtclock.ca and just see federal debt, right? And literally every second it's going up by about $1,000. In fact, they've got a giant van that drives around the country displaying this and updating in real time. But you guys maybe didn't know, back in, I believe it was January of this year, they literally had to add an extra digit because we rolled over from the hundreds of billions, into the trillions of dollars in debt. And so again, it's
like,
what?
Matt, when I was writing this into the description, I literally couldn't even like figure this number out. So that's $1 trillion of Canada federal debt.
Yeah. So essentially we're looking
trillion.
Yeah, so we can see the 1,000 column here going up every second, right? Then we've got our $1 million column. It doesn't take that long to for $1 million to roll over. Again, literally while we've been
Holy
doing this, we've
Christ.
gone up tens of thousands of dollars in debt. And then, then you've got your billion column here, and then finally a trillion. And what's nice too is they break it down. So if every single Canadian, if we all decided to chip in right now and pay off the debt, it would cost us $33,000 each.
But the problem is, if it was going up another $1,000 a second, you'd be be chasing your tail forever, dude.
And again, just for context, they break it down, the growth of debt per day. Right now, it's averaging $144 million per day.
Oh my God. What could you accomplish with $144 million a day?
Right. Again, if you like to talk in hours, it's $6 million per hour. Think about that. They're literally just like lighting $6 million in additional, right? Because the government actually takes in tax revenue. Like, it's wild when you think of the debt growth. Again, there's certain things like unfunded obligations that sometimes are difficult to really even put an accurate estimate on. And that's why it's important that we have organizations like the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, in my opinion. So let's jump over to the story that kind of triggered me to go into that little rant. This is from the Western Standard. Canada Taxpayers Federation releases plan to balance the federal budget, cut taxes. Let's just talk about a few highlights here. The CTF released in its 2023-2024 federal pre-budget submission on Wednesday, showing how the Canadian government can balance budget. The feds could balance the budget next year by returning pandemic spending, which was already at all-time highs, said Franco, federal director of the CTF. The report said, while it appears on this COVID-19 is driving the government's deteriorating financial position, there are other factors to play. $200 billion of new spending is not related to COVID-19, according to the parliamentary budget officer, while a recent Fraser Institute report found 40% of the pandemic deficits were not related to the pandemic. Even if the federal government managed to finally balance the budget in 2041, which is what they're currently projected to do, and spoiler alert, they absolutely will not do that with at least the current administration in place, right? Interest charges on the government's credit card will have cost taxpayers $802 billion, totaling $18,000 for every Canadian, if we could pay it off by 2041. And that's a big freaking if. In fact, that's an if that doesn't exist, essentially. It just...
Well, again, I'd also like to just call into question, like, for the average Canadian who maybe makes, like, I don't know what our median income is, maybe 40,000 or something like that, 50,000. We'd have to Google that. But like, how long do you think, Matt, that it would actually take the average Canadian at the median income to save $18,000? Because I actually think that would be a long time.
Yeah. Well, again, let's put this in context. Just a quick Google here. This is from stats.com. 2019, the median Canadian income was $37,710.
Yeah, and so after taxes,
if you were willing to work for free for an entire year, if every Canadian was willing to work for free for an entire year, we could pay off the debt,
providing there was no taxes on that income.
Yeah, and we stopped surplus spending.
Well, and you didn't spend any money getting to your job or eating while you were living, or you had no cost of shelter, or dental, or education, or anything, clothing.
Yeah, it's just wild. But continuing on with this article, more than $40 billion in annual savings is identified in the report, while an additional $41 billion in one-time savings were found. More than $38 billion corporate welfare subsidies, including direct cash subsidies, niche tax credits, loans, and loan guarantees, should also be canceled and returned to taxpayers. Furthermore, federal subsidies to businesses through crown corporations and regional development agencies should be scrapped. And I would like to believe, and we'll get into this in the last story of the day, I would like to believe that we can fix our existing system. I can't help but think that that's probably naivety on my part, because I think it's so bloated, it's so corrupt at this moment in time that we're probably better off to start over with a whole cloth strategy. But I really do appreciate that there's organizations like CTF that at least want to show us and break down for us how this at least theoretically could be possible. So taxpayer, and this is now from the actual Canadian Taxpayers Federation at taxpayer.com. Taxpayers Federation releases plan to balance the budget and cut taxes. And so they've got a nice little summary here. But I wanted to highlight a couple points. A recent Ipsos poll shows that 72% of Canadians say they pay too much tax. The CTF identified 51 national governments that provided tax relief during the pandemic or to ease the burdens of inflation. Canadians are paying too much tax because the government wastes too much money, said Terezno. A balanced budget means less debt for Canadian kids and grandkids to pay back, less money wasted on interest charges, and room to cut taxes. And that's the biggest thing here. It's really easy to think we can just keep kicking this can down the road, but there will be eventually one day consequences, right? The piper will need to be paid. And right now, your government essentially is selling your children into slavery, right? Or they're going to default on the debt, which is going to create absolute chaos at some moment in the future. So either they're a bad custodian of the future, or they're literally okay with selling your children into debt in perpetuity. Because right now, at least this $33,000 per Canadian, this is conceptually understandable, right? Like where you're like, okay, if I gave up 1 year of my entire life to work for the government for free, we in theory could pay this down if every one of us, like 35 million Canadians, kicked in. Again, that means like babies and stuff too, right? So like those babies are going to have to pull more than their own weight in this case. But by 2041, well, that's going to be an extra $18,000 just in interest payments. How much more deficit spending is going to occur by that? Like we're going to, I believe we're already past the point of no return, but if we're not, we are going to bump into that in our lifetimes. And that should be of concern for every single Canadian, in my opinion.
Man, my problem with this is like your statement that like they're either willing to enslave your children or they're bad custodians of the future. Like, I guess my only problem with that statement is that I don't even think it's hyperbolic. Like, I think it's literally the truth. And like to have to admit to that is crazy. Like, if you actually think about the real like takeaway or the real so what about that, it's like, man, if you actually believe that, that is wild. And I can't even disagree. And that's my problem. Like, shit, dude, that sucks.
Yeah, I agree. And let's jump over to the Mises Institute with our last story. Maybe there's a little bit of a white pill in here. So parallel structures are the only way to freedom. This is from Titus Gebel. The battle for political supremacy in the West has been decided. The so-called progressives have won. Conservatives and libertarians have lost. The march through the institution started by the misguided 1968 generation has been successful, and their children and grandchildren are now at the helm. Eco-socialist, cultural Marxists, in short, Bolshevik, and I really like that term, actually, Bolshevik.
That kills me. Bolshevik?
Right? Yeah, it's actually tight. Usually, sometimes it's questionable with libertarians, and particularly like the Mises Institute, whether they can make jokes, but this one's on point. Bolsheviks, ideas prevail in politics and culture, public administration, media, schools, universities, and increasingly even in business at accelerating speed. If you have kept the same center-left viewpoint over the remaining 20 years, you are considered far-right today. In virtually all democratic states, there is a tendency for larger organizations to drift to the left over time. This applies equally to television stations, newspapers, political parties, state authorities, universities, and other associations. First, if you like to create things, essentially, we're going to get into a twofold explanation here. First, if you like to create things or projects on your own, or prefer to work for making a living and then enjoying private life with your family, you are probably less inclined to join any of these institutions. On the other hand, if you like to manipulate other people and control them, you are very much inclined to join these institutions. Second, Conservatives and libertarians tend to be more tolerant towards differing political positions. If someone is known as a lefty in their organization, mostly they would allow this person to stay. Not so with the progressives. They want to missionize and force all non-progressive fellow citizens whom they consider either unenlightened or bribed to a happiness defined by them. Progressives only give a position in an organization to those who have the same worldview and kick out dissenters by all means. If one can mobilize $50 billion like Elon Musk, then one can take over Twitter. But it will still be difficult to turn the platform into a beacon of freedom of speech as planned. That's because virtually the entire workforce tends politically to the left. Relation of donations of Twitter employees in the Biden-Trump presidential campaign, 98-2. Let that sink in. 98 Democratic donations from Twitter employees versus 2% from Trump supporters. Since the majority of these people are convinced they are in the right and fighting for a good cause, Musk's attempt to allow dissent will be sabotaged. Musk will have to replace large parts of the workforce to change this in the long term. And again, this essay from cover to cover, but obviously it would take hours if in that. So learning through pain. The message is that the small number of advocates of freedom waste their energy trying to change systems from within that can be repaired. The drastic cure, rather, is to allow total and irrevocable failure of these systems learned through pain. Only this will drive the eco-socialist insanity out of people's minds to some extent. This cup must now be finished to the end. And this is my own little tangent here, but this almost feels like, some of the hysteria around witches, where you're like, man, we might actually just have to let them burn a few witches before people are going to wake up to the absurdity of what they're pushing and putting forward. Continuing on, this is not an easy medicine, as many people will suffer as a result, including those who saw the disaster coming and warned in time. But this is the only way to achieve a sustainable change in thinking and thus a turning away from status collectivism and toward personal responsibility, which by all means also includes caring for others. The opposite of political collectivism is not selfish individualism, self-determination. And this is a concept beyond left or right. And I 100% agree with that. Admittedly, there is a catch. You actually have to do something about it. Namely, get out of your comfort zone. It won't be enough just to write know-it-all articles or comments in online media or to participate in petitions and demonstrations. You have to do something new based on your own actions. That is exhausting. But in return, a meaningful existence beckons, creating the seed for a better and above all freer world. Even if it is not completely successful in our lifetime, the seed is sown for future generations. And really, everyone can participate and everyone is needed. So yeah, just wanted to kind of leave you guys with this essay and ideally this white pill, because I really do think that we can build these parallel institutions. I think that each of us will fight the fight in our own different way. But again, as we spoke about on Wednesday, we need to be speaking to the remnant. Don't worry if you're not convincing 50% plus one of the population today to change. That shouldn't be your mission. That shouldn't be your goal. Your goal should be to talk to the individuals that can be truly captured by the idea of self-determination, by the idea of liberty, by the idea of freedom. So in conclusion, we should try to start parallel structures immediately in order not to stand isolated in the coming turbulent times. It's a good thing. New communities of values can be created. People get to know each other and help each other. The path along the way gives confidence, is often even fun. And by doing instead of talking, the wheat is separated from the chaff. It always goes on somehow. It's up to us how. Let's spit on our hands and get to work. And again, just thought this was an excellent essay. Really encourage you guys, spend some time, jump into it. Reminder, links to all the articles we talked about today. I've already shared them in the Telegram chat. You can join it for free. Again, if you're the remnant, if you're listening to this, I suspect you're the remnant. It's on us to decide to spit on our hands, put in some work, right? Put our shoulder into it. But it will create life and existence.
Yeah, that's awesome, Matt. Really appreciate you sharing this article. And the Mises Institute has a ton of excellent resources for anybody that's not visiting there, frequently. So that's great, Matt. I agree. And again, I think one idea that we've talked about a lot of times on this show is just the idea of starting locally and within your sphere of influence and working from there out. And I think that those efforts put out consistently on a local or on a small level can have great effects downstream, right? It's the sort of butterfly effect there. So I'm definitely a big believer in that. And that is inspiring, right? It's a great white pill to end off the show on. And that kind of brings us into our Friday show, which is more of a community hangout day for you guys. And that's where we're going to be. On this show, I think we're going to be hanging out and talking about some spooky stuff. I think we're going to be talking about some Halloween stories, getting into sort of the theme of October, because that's when this one's being shot right now. It's October 38th or 28th. So we've got just a few days here until Halloween. And we're going to be sharing some fun stories and just kind of hanging out for a Friday show. So excited to see you guys all there. And we'll be right back in a couple of minutes. Anything else to add, Matt?
No, again, just appreciate you guys watching this. Smash the like button, hit the Rumble button, jump in the comment section. Let me quickly jump over to
Hey, did we get a Rumble?
I was just going to say,
Oh God, Matt's frozen.
We did not. That's all right. But appreciate you guys watching this, regardless of what platform you watch it on, regardless of whether you left us a live Rumble comment or not. I'm in there every single day, leaving us a live Rumble comment. So if nothing else, at least I'm talking to myself.
I love it. All right, guys, we'll be right back here in a couple of minutes talking about Halloween stuff and maybe some spooky stories or even some of our Halloween favorite movies. So see you right back here. Cheers.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day, no matter what the weather say. Life is like a record, so just let it play. Educate, motivate, entertain and demonstrate. Health, wealth, relationships and legacy we elevate. Every day is what you make it, so don't take it and waste it. Never too late to save it. Remember, roses grow from pavement. Let me break this down in layman's. Just wanna live outrageous, build my way to greatness. Gotta speak my truth and face it. Hear the basis lies, gotta challenge it and break it. Take a shot of truth, chase it with some motivation. The best day ever, the best day ever. We gon' squad up, have the best day together. Best day ever, best day ever. We gon' squad up, go hard in any weather. What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day, no matter what the weather say. Life is like a record, so just let it play. Best Day Ever Media. Song by Dan the Lost Boy.
All right. Well, we're back, or at least I should say I'm back. I think Adam just stepped away for a second from the computer, but as he mentioned or teased in the previous half of the show, we're going to be jumping in and talking everything Halloween. So we'll be sharing with you guys our favorite Halloween movies, our favorite Halloween stories or costumes or anything like that. Were you getting props, Adam?
No, no, I wish. I was trying to find my dog. She kind of disappeared. I got a little bit worried there because our back door stays a little bit open for the cat. I was a little worried she might have pieced out, but she was sleeping under the covers in my bed. So spooky stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
All right. Well, I thought full transparency here, guys. I feel like we're less prepared for this Friday show than most of our shows and certainly than previous Friday shows. But anyways, I thought it'd still be fun just to kind of chat and hang out with you guys. So we'd love to hear what's your favorite like scary movie, horror movie, or Halloween centric movie. Do you have a particular costume that you remember or Halloween experience? I think that's what we'll really talk about or share here. So, Adam, is there like one horror film or like scary movie that stands out for you?
Yeah. So I was so my mom was working quite a bit when I was a kid, right? She used to work these shifts. They call them the hell do they call it? Continental shifts. So she would like go on these weird rotations that were seemingly random to me at the time as a kid, but like these like 12-hour shifts that would like randomly alternate. And so I had a decent amount of time spent with babysitters, and my one babysitter, her name was Melissa. I'll never forget her. But her thing, we had this agreement that I would get there, but I would say nothing about it. And we would watch like the scariest shit together. And it was kind of cool because we had this kind of unspoken agreement that she would always show up with like a really cool, scary movie. So for us, I think one of the things we got really deep into was Friday the 13th. And we would constantly watch those films because there's actually a bunch of them. I'm not sure how many there are, but that was our thing. We'd watch that, and then we'd watch like Nightmare on Elm Street. We were watching all of these like crazy classic scary movies, and I will literally never forget because I used to do like I was always at our hunt camp too with my grandpa. So I just will never forget like Friday the 13th was so creepy because it was like kind of set at like a cabin out in the woods, and there was like these teenagers that were all there, and then Freddy, of course, comes out in his hockey mask and he's got his like chainsaw and all this like scary stuff, and he's just impossible to kill. And I think the scene that stands out most to me is like when he's in the maybe that's Halloween, I can't remember, but like the one of the scary movies like around that era has like him in the sheets that are like blowing around in the wind as I think it's like the mom or whatever's hanging her clothes on the line in the backyard, and he's just like standing there staring, and I was like, oh damn, that's so creepy. And like that particular scene has stuck out for so long. I remember it was a white face. I just can't remember if that's Jason or if that was Halloween. But anyways, like what a crazy scene. Like it's so freaky. Like it's just blowing in the wind and then he's just not there. And it's like one of those like classic cinema tricks where he's there and then the wind blows, the sheet flies up in her face and then he's not there. And she's like, oh, it was probably nothing. But it was definitely something. She gets murdered, right? I'm like, shit, that's so creepy.
Yeah. I don't think I've actually watched too many of those films. And it's not that like I dislike them, but I also just don't seek them out, I guess. So I think I've watched maybe one or two of the Halloweens, like maybe one of the first ones, and then like was there like H2O or something that was like a updated version of it. And I don't know if I've seen any of like the Friday the 13th or like the Freddy ones.
Well, the thing about particularly Halloween and the Friday the 13th one, like Nightmare on Elm Street, I believe is a little bit different, but the particularly interesting thing especially at the time too, when you're younger, but also just the era of cinema that we were in, Friday the 13th uses almost, I'd have to rewatch it, but I'm going to say like almost no visual effects at all. Like there may be some fake blood, there may be some whatever, but like they relied heavily on the angles that they were using with the cameras and like sort of that Spielberg, Jaws, Jurassic Park sort of withholding the true like you didn't spend a lot of time seeing all this like violence and gore. It was mostly the suspense of knowing that he was outside the window or that he was in the other room waiting or that he was behind those sheets blowing in the wind. And I think for me, that was what was truly terrifying, especially when you're younger, is like it was so close to what you would regard as reality that it was like completely believable, right? And anything that was where it required you to suspend disbelief, it was a reach that you were able to make, right? Like, oh, you got shot, but maybe he wasn't actually that wounded, right? And he gets away and he heals back up and he's right back there the next summer to kill them all. And like, it was just so believable and so well done because they leveraged the technology that they had without having to rely on like these hardcore visual effects and stuff. And that's to me, like what makes those particular movies classics, where I'm sure they were better when I was younger. I haven't watched them in a very long time, but just that sleight of hand, right? The trickery with the lighting or with the camera angles and things like that was so real that it made it like this visceral experience as a kid. And I think that's what like was really cool about it.
Um, I know we don't have a lot of concurrent listeners, but let me know, is it that the audio is cutting out, or is it on Adam's end? Jump in the comments, let us know. But I think I caught most of what you were saying there, Adam. For myself, I think probably the movie that like in that genre of like horror or Halloween oriented stuff that I definitely have watched the most, and I would say is my favorite, would be Cabin in the Woods. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
I'm familiar with the title, but I honestly can't remember if I've seen it.
So this is an old movie, or oldish enough that I don't feel like this is a spoiler. Although I imagine it would stand up today. But what I loved about it, it was like it starts off literally like almost an over the top typical horror movie where it's like these five kids, they've got a cabin in the middle of the woods and they're going out to party. And it's like there's like the jock, there's the hot chick, there's the girl, there's like the complete stoner nerd dude, and they show up at the cabin in the woods, and essentially like some creepy things kind of start happening. And like the way in every horror movie it starts out where like the kids don't take it seriously, right, and they're making kind of like light of what should actually be a scary situation. And anyways, long story short, you end up finding out that like this is all actually some sort of like giant elite cabal that owns this cabin in the woods. And depending upon how the kids act, and there's cameras everywhere, and people are betting on like who's going to survive. And it just turns into this fascinating little exploration, and really like takes the genre, like flips it on its head to a certain extent, and really uh subverts a lot of the norms by the end of the movie. But essentially it's like, you know, one kid picks up like a enchanted box and like almost opens the lid, and had they opened that, something crazy would have happened. And like guys are literally, like it cuts to the behind the scenes of like the guys pulling the strings, and like they're betting huge sums of money, and like literally they've got like boards and betting, and just like it it's fascinating because it's still somehow like a scary horror movie, but there's also these like periods of like extreme levity, because like the behind the scenes stuff all feels just so silly or over the top. And then like in any like, you know, well-rounded wrapped with a bow on top sort of production or presentation, the bad guys get their comeuppance by the very end of it as well. So yeah, definitely love that movie, and it's a standout for me in the horror genre.
Well, that's something that hits on a genre of book I used to love reading, which was the sort of choose your own adventure style books.
Yeah.
And I've been such a huge fan of those ever since I was a kid. And there was this film actually on Netflix that I think got so close to making something brilliant that it's not even funny that they missed the mark, but they missed the goddamn mark.
Okay. Well, I'm curious because
yeah.
I couldn't watch it. Like I started watching it, and I
horrible.
actually just didn't like it at all. Like I
It
think
was horrible.
one or two of like the choose your own adventures, and it's like, which cereal do you want to eat? And like it ended up like essentially having no difference or whatever. I was just like, eh. And so
But
like I literally never actually watched it.
so I believe that was called Bandersnatch or something like that,
Yes,
right?
that sounds familiar.
But Matt, like what I was really excited for is had they hit that on the head, how exciting it would have been to elevate cinema in that way, right? Where if you could truly impact the outcomes of the film or of the story, and what it would say about you at the end of it, because I believe that was an edition on Black Mirror. And so I had these really high hopes because I was like, oh shit, what if they're actually making a point that they can make me do things through the technology that they're making a joke about, right? Or not even making a joke about, but they're trying to tell us about the pitfalls and the interesting elements of our own technology and our human behavior. And like now they've got me on my couch at home looking like a lazy slob, just attached to my television for 2 hours. And like it was such a fascinating, in my mind, I made it so much cooler than what they were able to execute on. But that is like something that I've always been craving when it comes to television, or when it comes to essentially bringing the pages of what are excellent works of fiction onto the theater and onto the big screen. And like, I wish they had nailed that for us, because they didn't, and it could have been so cool. But yeah, anyways, choose your own adventure. Like the idea, the concept of that is cool.
I feel like most kids, there was an era of that, right? Like, was it the Scholastics books or whatever would come to your school, and you would like grab a few of those, a few Goosebumps and whatever else in regards to like that sort of fiction?
Yeah. For me, actually, it was this little book series, and I will never, ever, ever forget it, which is crazy. But getting a little off topic here, but it was called Deltora Quest, and these little novellas were maybe, I don't know, 100 or 200 pages, but like you could pick your path through it, and there was like many books, and it was so goddamn cool. And I ended up obviously reading all the various avenues, but it was just such a fascinating exploration for a young mind, that like there wasn't just a beginning, a middle, and an end to any hero's journey. It was like it could take many paths, and there were so many other things. And then that sort of led me down the path of like the Elder Scrolls video games, right? Where there was all those, like there was a main quest, and then there was like all these sub quests, and you could literally spend days of active playing time just trying to explore the various quests throughout the maps. And I don't think it's even a beatable game because there's so many. But anyways, I've always just loved that. It's too bad we don't see that here in cinema. But anyways, interesting exploration of choose your own adventure.
And so like, it sounds like both of us, at least as kids, like read some horror books. Do you read like horror books as an adult? I know for whatever reason, it's something that I don't, but I don't even know why I don't. Like, I've never, and I think this is a right framing of it. And again, you guys can correct me, but like, I've never read like a Stephen King novel or anything like that.
Oh, that's a huge loss for yourself, Matt. I actually read many of Stephen King's books. If you were to attempt to read them all, I think you may still be reading, because he was absolutely prolific. But at the same time, thinking about a book like Carrie, for example, like we all know the cinema representation of it, and it was great. The film, I thought, was very good because it captured a lot of the emotion and a lot of the shame and a lot of the guilt, and then a lot of the rage, and like it got a lot of that onto the screen. And some of the things like the pig's blood, right, was very evident and very very visceral on the film, in a way that perhaps some people's minds would have been challenged to grasp on the page. But like, fuck, man, those books are good. They're so good. I'm thinking of Carrie was fantastic, right? Shawshank Redemption, fantastic. The Green Mile, epic. But I think the Stephen King book that stands out to me the most was the Dreamcatcher novel. Epic book, and epic film too. Even that film, I think, was very well put together and captured a lot of what was going on in his thoughts at that time. And then finally, I think one of the greatest Stephen King books ever written, which he claims to actually not remember writing, which was, I believe it was Misery. He made those claims, but fantastic book. And Pet Sematary, honestly, was a great one too. Like, I read all these as a kid. Like, I was up under the blankets because mom would come upstairs, and luckily we had like the shittiest house, so you could hear every step coming, right? There was probably 30 steps on like a bit of a wind, like it took a turn, and I could tell the difference between like the middle steps and the landing step that was like the last 3 steps. So I would have to have my lights off because she could see the lights under the door, but I would throw my blanket up and just use like a flashlight and be reading under my blankets. And she hilariously would come up the stairs and be like, "Adam, I know you're reading. Like, go to bed. You have to be up for school." And I just lay there silently and try not to make a sound and try to be try and get my light profile down as much as possible. But she always knew. But yeah, man, I was crushing Stephen King books as a kid.
That's interesting. Yeah, definitely a voracious reader, but it was always like again, outside like the Goosebumps and stuff, for me, it was always like science fiction and fantasy that seemed to capture the bulk of all my reading. Were you guys like a big Halloween family?
Yeah, dude. My mom was really cool because like we didn't have a ton of money, but she always had like a ton of drive to do like the fun stuff. Like, so Halloween was always like this big thing, right? Like she had a ton of like, and even today she has like all the things outside, like not like Christmas vacation type of decorating, but
Hmm.
like she would have like the glowing pumpkins. There would be like little doormat things that like if you stepped on them would give you like sounds and like something would pop out or whatever. Fake cobwebs and spiders and shit through all the shrubs or whatever was out front, boxwoods, I remember. And for me, like when I was really young, I remember we would always make my costume because like the Halloween stores were like expensive and like it was just
Hmm.
it was too much. So we would always make my costumes. And the first one I ever remember was a bumblebee. And I have no idea how we made it. I think it was felt. I think it was felt like sewed together, but it was like I was really young and it was a bumblebee. And I remember making a lion costume. Um, there's a huge gap between remembering those two costumes and then like what I remember next was like grade 7. I did James Bond. So I had like this shitty suit from like I don't know, probably Value Village or something like that. And like at the time it was like the coolest thing ever. I had like my my Sony Walkman was like the piece of high tech thing that I was carrying. It was like this yellow
Mm.
Sony Walkman, and like that
Yep.
was just the coolest shit ever. And like we kind of like made the microphone like look like a lapel microphone. Like we cut a hole in it and made it look like there was a microphone there where a button should be. And we did a couple little tricks like that to just make it more of a James Bond style thing. And then I carried my mom's old mom or stepdad's like one of these seriously old like Motorola brick phones, and that was like my cool gadget.
Nice.
So I was tricked out for that, and obviously no weapons were allowed at school, so no plastic guns or anything. But when we went trick or treating, I believe I
I
had
feel
a
like
plastic gun.
in my era, you probably would have been able to get away with it. That must have either been like a regional thing or like
It was
just
a
like a
Catholic school, so I don't think they were down for
oh,
any
we
type
were
of
too.
symbolism like that.
Yeah. No, I'd almost bet that you could at our
Yeah, at least
school.
I don't remember. Maybe I was like I don't
Because like I
remember,
feel
but
like kids
I'm
dressed up
sure.
as cowboys with 6 shooters and stuff like that.
Yeah, or maybe it was like I had to have like the orange thing on the end. I can't remember. It was so long ago, but like,
Sure, yeah.
yeah, it was a
Just
big
kind of
deal.
an
I mean, like
observation.
that was always a thing, right? And like the other thing was we always had like school dances, right? So like you would go to the school dance in your costume. Like that was always a thing at our school. So like, you know, like you kind of wanted to have a cool costume because you were going to go to the cool dance. And then like that's where the cool people were going to be doing cool people things. So yeah, that was definitely a big deal. How about you? Were you dressed up?
Uh like yeah, but like I feel like as a family we were always the ones that like we had some good intentions but just never executed too much. So I think probably like as a young child, the most memorable Halloween costume would have been one that we like bought off the shelf that was like Raphael from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when that was popping, and
Classic.
that probably would have been like I don't know 4 or 5 or 6 somewhere around that age, and then like I guess how long did you stay a trick or treater? Like, did you go up until grade 7, 8? Did you push it past that?
I I don't remember the exact kind of time, but I would say like straight into grade 8 or 9, we were out collecting candy, like as a joke at that point. But at the same time, we'd get dressed up and go out and
Hmm.
drink a pile of beers. I don't know about you, but me and my friends were beginning our stages of partying on the weekend very early. So like grade 7 or 8, we were
See,
having
yeah,
parties on the weekend,
and
drinking
we can
beer.
maybe save this for like another whole discussion, but I think in high school, I might be misremembering one time, but I think I only drank once, and that was to
What?
excess. And the reason was like my group of friends, we essentially were straight edge, and that was like our form of protest. Like that was us rebelling to a certain extent because all of our families at least had like 1 or 2 heavy drinkers in them, and so like that was almost like I guess actually, yeah, I can think of 2 times now. But yeah, that was it. And like we would go to parties where people were heavily drinking and stuff, but like just it was never of interest, I guess. And then in university, for some reason, all of us went off to different schools and completely flipped
Yeah.
personalities and became heavy drinkers. But yeah, I think that I probably went until I think it was grade 7, but it might have been grade 8. But I remember the last year we went trick or treating. Like I grew up on a farm, so you had to drive everywhere, right? So very inefficient candy gathering, but you also got like huge payouts. Like there would be
Yeah.
houses that would have like
Like just
an entire
handfuls.
grab bag of candy, right? And like we'd always give out a whole like a large chocolate bar. And there'd be people that would like
Yeah.
give out supersized chocolate bars and stuff because like my parents would always keep track, and I'm sure they still do. But like at peak, we'd maybe get like when you're a kid and your friends come to trick or treat and stuff like that, we'd maybe get like 40 or 50 trick or treaters. And like I think now that, you know, my like there's not peers that are young, I think like my parents maybe get 1 or 2 trick or treaters
Yeah.
now.
Dude, my grandparents are adorable. They live on like the outside of Collingwood, essentially, like the last street of Collingwood. Literally across
Mhm.
the street is Blue Mountain. And every single year they load up on like that trick or treat kind of candy and stuff or whatever. They might get 2 people. But every year they've got the box. They're ready there. So like if it's getting
Yeah.
close to like the end of the night, they'll just be like, "What do you want? Do you want like all this shit? Just take it." And but it was always a competition. Like in town, we would get a lot, man. There was a lot of kids near where I was living, and like I would easily get like 3 bags of candy, right? Or like 2 or 3 pillowcases of candy, and like that would just be the craziest thing ever. And then there was always like the sorting party after. I don't know if you guys did that, but my mom was hardcore on like making sure because at the time I don't know what the hell people were poisoning things with. Like today it would be fentanyl.
It was
At the
actually
time,
all rumors. Like if you look
was
into
it?
it, I've spent like there's like 1 or 2 edge case scenarios where like someone hid an actual razor blade in an apple or something, but like it's like
It was just
99.9% of the stories are urban legends, but like
yeah,
it's one of those weird things. Like same with this is tangential, but on DGen Friends, people are talking about like needles and ball pits. I'm
yeah.
sure there's 1 or 2 edge case scenarios where that's the case, but like that level of hysteria that comes out from your average parent in regards to it just like triggers them. But so your mom was going through making sure nothing was like no wrappers, no seals were broken.
It was like a whole thing, but I think it was honestly just as much about like getting to kind of hang out after like the
Sure.
the euphoria of
Like
trick or treating.
decompress. Yeah.
And so that was always actually something I look forward to. And of course, we would like eat some candy at that moment. This actually just brought up a thought. Joe Rogan just had its number 1888, Michael Shermer. And this guy, he works, his full time job is to work for a publication called Skeptic. And they actually have a discussion about this type of thing, right? And I think that they got a little bit into the weeds on some JFK stuff, but they had an interesting discussion about like this type of urban legend thing. And one of his thesis in the book that they talk about is just like essentially why we would have evolved to like make that assumption. Like
Sure.
it would be very expensive for us not to
Yeah.
believe that story if it was true, and very inexpensive for us to believe that story whether or not it is true or not. And so like I think that's a really great decision matrix, right? Like sorting through candy, maybe it takes half an hour, but what if that other story was true, right? And I think that's actually pretty good perspective to take on this type of thing. But yeah, I mean, it was always fun, right? Like dump out all your candy and you're like, oh no, like some sort of healthy thing. You like push that off to this. I always sorted mine by like my level of favoritism to it. So like
Desirability. Yeah.
Mr. Biggs always went in one pile, right? Or like Coffee Crisp. I was always a huge fan of that. Like Mr.
Yeah.
Big, Coffee Crisp, Mars bars, Snickers, all those were in like the go pile. And then there was like, what were those? Dude,
Like
what
the
were those?
rockets, the shitty
Yeah.
candy,
Fuck.
and like
Who is
yeah.
giving rockets out? Like you have to be a bad person. But what were those? And only you are going to know this. I got you in the right age demographic here. I believe it was a white, red, and blue package, but it was like this, like it was like chocolate, and then inside it's not licorice, but it's like close enough, and they're gross.
I
Or
think
maybe
I
it was
know
a
what you
yellow.
mean, but I wouldn't be able to like
Maybe it was a yellow package, but they're just disgusting. Okay, candy with
And I never really liked like the toffee type things either. That
Oh no, I
like
like those
there's
ones.
the dark toffee thing. I can't think of it, but it was like a brown and white wrapper, I think, maybe with some red. Um, Never a fan of that either.
Oh, I like those ones. Like this,
Yeah,
I think they're called, like I think it's called sponge toffee. I don't know what the hell the actual candy bar was
the
called.
specific brand. Yeah. Did you guys have like any? I don't know what made me think of this, but there was something you said. I guess we were talking about like urban legends. Did you guys have like any scary urban legends that like kids would talk about in grade school or high school? Like either was it like the house with the guy and the thing, or someone that like lived in the swamp, or
Um, I don't think we had any of that, but one of the things that if you went to my particular school, and I think like other schools from other cities would have done it too, but like my school always did this trip to, it's called Camp Kitschy, and honestly, like thinking about that now, I don't even know where that is. It's probably close to like Honey Harbor or something. Camp Kitschy. I think maybe it's actually called Camp Kitschy Kawana. But anyways, we always call it Camp Kitschy. So yeah, it's on Beau Salai Island in Georgian Bay. Holy shit, that is actually really far. How did we get there?
did
Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, did you ever do anything? I had to Google it to make sure I had my shit right, but I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure this is it. And there's another version of it as well. But like, did you guys growing up ever try and like Ouija board spirits or play Bloody Mary or anything like that?
A Bloody Mary, I think, was definitely a thing, but like I think that was like a locker room joke. Even people would like scribble it when it was foggy. But yeah, with Camp Kitschy, because like so just googling this is really fascinating to me now. It's like northwest of Port Severn. So like yeah,
Yeah.
it is right by Honey Harbor. But like that's super far from where I live. So anyways, we take this big bus trip, go over to Camp Kitschy. We were very young. And I don't even remember what grade we would have done this, maybe grade 6 or something like that, or 5. But there was always camp counselors. So it was like literally the perfect Friday the 13th situation where like there was like kids and camp counselors. And then like somewhere, I'm sure there was an adult or two. And so what went on in that situation was like people would pull these like pranks. And honestly, it was probably the camp counselors that were doing it, but like they would like rub sticks on the walls and shit like that and like
Mm.
scratch at the doors in the middle of the night. And it was honestly horrifying because you're on this like random island and they were like, there's bears and there's wolverines and there's like scary shit out here. And so like I think that was definitely a real thing. Definitely some hazing there.
I remember like as a young kid, we'd at least like once or twice at like sleepovers play Bloody Mary, and the version like we were taught was you had to be like lights had to be off in the bathroom, and you like said Bloody Mary and had to spin around like, and each time you had to look at yourself in the mirror and say Bloody Mary, and like 3 or 4 times, and then she'd appear, and like it was supposed to either be like she'd appear or like it would reveal like your face, but you'd be covered in blood, and um I definitely never got like psyched up enough to actually see it, but I remember one kid claiming he saw it or whatever. Again, who knows with like maybe it turned out like that kid was in on it or whatever, but it was always those things. But we had like people would talk about at like shack parties and stuff where it'd just be like out in the bush or bush
Yeah.
parties. There was I forget the exact terminology now, but I want to say it was like either the green witch or the bog witch or something like that. And it was supposed to be this like lady that roamed the swamps and stuff, like the hay swamp and things like that. And I don't even remember like the urban legend now, but it was supposed to be this scary thing. And like I think it would always be one of those things where like people would push it on the grade niners at like a bush
Yeah.
party or whatever, and like try and get them to go into the swamp or whatever and
Well,
fuck with
we
them.
had
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to grow up right around the time of the Blair Witch Project. And I remember my buddy's my good friend's older brother, he and a couple of guys like set out into the woods on, it's called the Black Ash Trail in Collingwood. And it's like literally identical to the type of setting that was in the Blair Witch Project. And they spent weeks, man, creating all those little doodads and like little wooden like dolls and stuff and like the little symbols that were
Mm.
throughout that movie, and they layered them all over Black Ash Trail and then took their buddy out and like they camped out. They went camp and set up tents on the trail, and like they straight up had him 100% convinced that the Blair Witch Project was real, and they pulled some scary shit and like dragged the one friend through the bushes and stuff and like scared the shit. Yeah, they went all out. He like actually had a nervous breakdown. But I found my candy. This is the worst thing you could have ever got as a kid. You're like, get the hell out of here. And I don't even know, like, I actually don't even know what this is. But whatever it is, it's disgusting. It's basically licorice covered in candy in chocolate. And the list that it's part of, which I was unaware of, was 10 chocolate bars you'll only find in Canada.
Dude, I knew most of these. Yeah.
Are Canadian?
Yeah.
What? Caramel is Canadian? Dude, I love caramel, by the way. This shit.
I do too. That was one of my favorites.
And Wonder Bar is actually too good, man.
Yeah, crispy crunch. So like, you know, like there's the 4-packs of like variety candy. All those are Canadian. So the Smarties, the Coffee Crisp, the what else was it? There was like, too. It used to be like there was like a pack and it was essentially just all plus Kit Kats, and Kit Kats were universal.
Oh, like this is the one you were thinking about, right? Crunchy?
No.
With the toffee shit in the middle?
No. Let me see if I can find it.
Okay. Also, though, shout out to these goddamn things being disgusting as a kid, but pretty not bad right now. I would definitely eat these right now.
I wouldn't.
No? You don't like chocolate, though. You're a bad test subject here. Even these goddamn things, man. I remember when these came out at the movie theater. We upgraded in our town from Cinema 4, which we've talked about it before in our movie episode, but like literally the flattest row of seats you could ever find in a theater ever. It was perfectly level, so you couldn't see anything if you were not taller than the person in front of you. But when we got a Galaxy, like Cineplex Galaxy or whatever, in Collingwood, dude, they had these goddamn Malteser things and people went ballistic. They were so good. But yeah, holy, that's wild.
I feel like this is also cap. Like, that's interesting. It couches your screen view, eh?
Oh, cool. That's and I can reply if I want to Trump ears, I can.
So yeah, we can literally just. But yeah, dude, this was all cap in my opinion.
Oh yeah, those are bullshit. I remember that.
Yeah. There's a lot of those where like you can tell the person was just being frugal because you'd buy like a bag for like what you get hundreds of pieces of candy and they're like, oh, this will do.
Yeah, but shout out to the guys making this freaking rubber candy because they were like somehow able to continue producing that for literally decades with not a single person enjoying it. Like not one.
Mm-hmm. Actually, the one candy that I'd always get super excited because it was a rare find when it came to like Halloween. I'm just remembering this now. And like you can find them in any store, but anyways, I just didn't get access to them a lot. Was like the Swedish berries. Like every now and then you get those packs of like Swedish berries or Sour Patch Kids or whatever, and it was like, they were just like the edge case scenarios of candy.
Well, that's when stuff started getting like I think. At that point, they had really realized the industry or the market that they could cap on. And so like now Halloween candy is absurd. Like I saw my little sister because she's like 10 or 12 years younger than me. And when she's out trick-or-treating, man, she comes back with the craziest shit. Like they have got everything now. It's like, it's actually kind of crazy. And like, it's so out of hand now, dude. There's like 400 different types of chocolate bars. They're all out there for Halloween. She's coming home with the craziest stuff. But like, there's also now she's coming home with like a lot of fruit, and you're like, oh shit! Like you're getting swung on by some members of society who are just protesting.
And like,
this thing.
Don't get me wrong, this is all garbage shit, right? Like this is literally just like poison that you're giving. It's like it almost like there's a sense of irony there that like. Trick or treat originally was like, give me something or I'll fuck up your house. And then now it's like people give shit that's going to poison children essentially to placate the children that threaten them.
But like, I'm certain at this point, it's just like 100% a like industrial sabotage, right? Like it's just.
You know what's interesting is like, and I'm sure it's even worse now, but like the supply chain moves so fast. And I was always such like a last minute person when I'd like once you're kind of an adult or you're living at your own house or whatever and you want to give out candy. There was like 1 or 2 years where like I had lady friends that were on top of it, so like there was no way it was going to slip through the cracks. And then there was one year where I was just by myself at Gatewood before I moved to Central, and it was like October 30th it was actually Halloween. And I stopped off after work and I was like, I'll buy some candy. Like I forgot, but whatever. And just there's none there. It literally looked like a post-apocalyptic scene where there's like there's like you see the skids where the candy used to be, and there'd be like a half-torn box open just sitting there sadly. And I was just like, I guess I'm turning my lights off tonight.
Yeah, that was the other thing too. That was always a pretty good thing, eh? The light on or off. That was a cool trick.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the shame you would cast at the one neighbor who didn't have their goddamn light on. You're like, you owe me this. And
well, yeah, and then you're just like, I'm going to pretend that I'm not home all night long, right? So you're like, until like midnight, you didn't feel safe turning your lights back on.
Right?
And like I remember
blinds.
When I was in the city, like one of the first Halloweens, there was dudes that looked older than me that came to my house trick-or-treating, but they were bigger than me, so I gave them candy.
Yeah, you know your
and like
place.
Also, I'm not a small guy, right? So like these guys were all above 6 feet tall. They're standing a step lower, but like they were actually taller than me.
Damn it. That's a real pain in the ass. But
and no costumes.
No, okay.
Not
no
even
costume.
But they had bags. So you knew why they were at your door.
Dude, no costume, no candy. Those are the rules.
But yeah, I think that's probably most of my Halloween conversation. I don't know if there's anything else you want to hit upon here, Adam, but I hope everyone has a great Halloween. I guess that's Monday, right? Or is it Tuesday? Monday, yeah.
It's got to be Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Matt, are we watching a movie tonight? Are we watching They Live Here?
Well, I sent you multiple DMs on Telegram throughout this morning and received no replies, so I assumed we weren't.
Okay.
But yeah, whatever you want to do. Like I said in my DMs, doesn't matter to me.
All right. Well, I kind of think that we should, because it would be fun for everybody, namely Al, who's probably our only viewer right now that's on.
But I guess couples here, I think we'll have to stream on Rumble only, right? Otherwise, we'll get copyright struck. And two, we need to set a time, and we should probably, like, if we're going to do They Lived, I'm down with that, or pick a different movie, because I don't know how, like, it's a John Carpenter movie, so I assume it's at least like horror adjacent, but I don't actually know if it's defined as a horror movie. Also from 1988.
Well, what could be better than a John Carpenter movie from 1988?
Yeah, I guess it's described as a satirical science fiction action horror film. I mean, you're kind of a cop-out there when you say all those words together. Satirical, science fiction, action, horror.
Yeah, I feel like I can't trust you. Or we could watch Nightmare Before Christmas. That would work.
Yeah, I've never seen that movie either, so.
What?
No. There's something about it that just didn't, like, look good to me as a kid. I
mean, it's not great, but it is actually.
Again, like, I know people love it. It's a cult film. I'm, like, again, haven't actually watched it, so I'm not throwing shade, but I don't know. There's just random movies, like, as a kid that for whatever reason you get into your head that, like, it's not my speed.
You're just a rebel, dude. I've heard this about you several times.
Yeah. Just pick random hills to die on.
Well, let us know in the comments. Send us a DM.
You'll need to set a time if we're actually doing this, because like there's no way people are just going to stumble upon it.
Well, I know, but it's like I'm still trying to move today.
Well, again, like I said, we don't even need to do this, but or we could leave it till Monday and just procrastinate. Hey,
Monday's a new day. Well, Monday actually is Halloween, so that might even make more sense, because then what we could do, Matt, is we could do a watch party of something. Maybe our fans will tell us what we should watch, and then
that works for me.
What we could do is we could do the live stream and have trick-or-treaters, right? So we're watching, we're streaming, and we'll have trick-or-treaters.
Well, I'll let you know. I'm going to get 0 trick-or-treaters.
You don't know that. You don't know that. Les could come over at any time.
Who's going to drive down like a mile or like a kilometer-long road? Like, that shit would be scary.
What if you get trick-or-treaters by boat? What are you going to do? Are you prepared for this? Do you have
the Navy's not ready.
Dude, imagine they drive down your kilometer driveway and you have a goddamn apple.
I kind of just quickly wanted to hit this out, and let's just see, what are the scariest movies of all time? This is
I'm telling
according
you, the scariest movie of all time is The Orphan. That movie is horrifying. The Exorcist isn't even scary.
I think you have to give it some context.
Like, for the
right?
time, maybe.
Yeah. Like, and again, I don't think it wasn't scary, but
What is
it
this?
wasn't like
Hereditary.
Yeah, I've never seen Hereditary. That's a newer movie. A dark family drama about the nature of grief couched with a supernatural horror film.
Jesus.
The Conjuring. I think I've heard of it, but never seen that either.
I've never seen that. I don't really watch a lot of horror films
Yeah.
either.
The Shining.
Yeah, it's a
I've
shit
watched it,
movie.
but a long time ago. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That was, and then the
Okay,
newer version too.
But
Like-
that's the thing about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, again, goes back to those classics where, like, straight up, it was horrifying because it was so realistic. It was like, this could easily happen anywhere. Of course this could happen. And then, like, fuck, man, they did a good job with that one.
about The
where-
Ring.
Like,
Like,
The Ring was horrifying.
it was a cultural phenomenon at the time, and literally I had a friend that just refused. Like, it became a
wasn't-
running joke, is we'd start to play it and he would just like rage quit your house and he
Oh,
would just
man.
drive home. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And like, yeah, I can remember like multiple times us like being like, oh, we should watch it. And like, yeah, there was one person in our group that it was like actually their favorite movie, so she always wanted to watch it. Halloween. Never heard of. Insidious. I've heard of it, but I've almost seen none of these.
Insidious was freaky, dude. It was
Insidious?
definitely freaky.
Interesting. All right. Well, you guys can let us know if you've got any movie recce's for us. We'll take under advisement for Monday.
All right. Sounds good. What a hilarious episode. This actually came together better than it should have.
Agree.
So
Yes, 100%.
well, thanks for watching along with us, guys. We'll be back Monday, and Monday is, of course, our business and professional development day. So we'll be back for you. I believe Monday is actually going to be me this time, and that rarely happens on a Monday. It's typically Matt, or at least in the past few weeks, it's been Matt doing that for you. This Monday, I'm actually going to be talking about how to select your real estate investing strategy. So I realize that may not apply to everybody, but for those of you that are interested in real estate investing, I'm going to be talking all about some of the considerations you may want to have when it comes to which strategy should you select. And of course, we will be leaning back on previous episodes. So as a prereq, you should listen to our episode on SMART goals, as well as our episode on the 4 disciplines of execution. That would be a great starting point to set you up for success for that episode on Monday, I guess the 31st.
And this wasn't completely on purpose, but I would even say watching literally every Monday episode before that one, because the other one was about financial independence, right? So like,
Yep.
they actually all fit together very nicely in regards to taking you kind of on a journey. If you're just new to investing or looking to just sharpen your skill set.
Absolutely, guys. Well, we'll see you Monday. Yeah, we're gonna be chatting all about real estate investing, which is something that for once we're actually experts on, or at least we'll claim to be. So have a great weekend, you guys, and we'll see you back Monday. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.